let's just get started. So, just one of the things I find very interesting about our business owners that we deal with and business owners across the country is that they're not pivoting. People are not pivoting to different things. They're trying to make their businesses work. Business owners have a certain resilience, which is apropos for the name of this presentation and apropos for the name of this event, to kind of keep their business going and maybe pivoting with inside their business, doing things a little differently or a little more efficient with the downtime they may have now. But business owners want to survive. Their business is viewed as a growth of them, and they tend to really put everything into it. It's not just necessarily about making a living, which is obviously important, but it's also about what does it say about me? And I'm gonna, if I put all my eggs in this basket, I'm gonna make it work. So that's something that we think is very important when it comes to planning. So one of the things we always ask our clients when we start with them is, are you a business owner or are you self-employed? And if you guys heard the beginning of this presentation, I apologize. I'm not sure where I got cut off. And the reason we ask that question, even though most people say, I don't know, what are you talking about? What does that mean? Is because the answer to that question really determines how we plan for you and how we plan for you as a client. If you are a business owner, that means that you have your business runs in spite of you, not because of you. And that's a big difference. If the business runs because of you, and all the decisions and the daily growth of the business and the daily, movement forward of that business is dependent on you, on your decisions, on your input on a daily basis, then we are going to plan for your business a little differently than we're going to plan for a business that has already built into it employees that are going to run the business in spite of the business owner's decisions. If there's, board in place, if there's different members in place that different employees in place that make things work. Obviously, it's going to be a different situation. Okay, so our firm focuses on businesses that are privately held, which means that it's owned by one or two people, by a couple of people. It's not traded on the open market like stocks. It's not a stock-owned business. And small to medium size. Small means 1 to 3 employees, $500,000 in revenue to all the way up to 30, 40, 50, $100 million in revenue businesses and beyond. But that's really kind of our sweet spot. We like medium-sized businesses. We love businesses where, the family wants to kind of keep it within the family. That's a whole dynamic that's very, very interesting to us and we can bring a lot of value to the table. So that's what we focus on. So the profile of what a closely held company would look like to us and what it would look like on a tax return, and may look like if you're trying to present yourself to your school board to get a tax deduction or tuition deduction. It's going to look like that you're high net worth because your business has intrinsic value to it. You're going to have high reportable income on your tax return. Again, high reportable income and high take-home pay is not the same thing. You're going to have the ability to leverage that asset of the business to your advantage and may have a low tax consequence because of that. You will presumably have not a ton of liquidity. Most business owners, put everything back into their business to a very high degree. And you'll have personal guarantees on debt, vehicles, and bonds, and leases, and things that are problematic from a planning perspective, but require, deep insight. One of the things I was saying before I got cut off, or maybe just to myself the whole time, was anyone who lived through 2008 and is in the real estate space, or even people who are maybe not in the real estate space professionally as a business owner, but maybe have an asset or two in the real estate space. We were advising our clients not to take the PPP loan if they were taking it on real estate assets, meaning someone who has a building or two, let's say in the Bronx or in the city or in Brooklyn, or anywhere else, and you had 1 or 2 employees inside that real estate asset, and that's where you were using that payroll to get a PPP loan. That's going to void your non-recourse clause inside your personal debt on that real estate asset. So let's say, for example, you have 3 or 4 tenants and you have 2 employees inside that building that do the cleaning and the maintenance and whatever it may be, and you took out a PPP loan to cover the payroll of those 2 or 3 employees. let's say to the tune of $20,000, $30,000, and then you can't make your mortgage payment in 6 months from now because all your tenants are out of money and they're not paying you, and then you default on that mortgage, now that debt's not fully recourseable and they're going to come after your assets personally, meaning now you're a full guarantor on that debt versus before maybe you were not a full guarantor on that debt. So, these are things that we always find to be very interesting when people tell us. We have clients tell us all the time, my debt to equity ratio is very healthy. I have a ton of debt in my business. And then we look through their business operations. We look through their P&Ls. We look through their mortgage statements if they're real estate asset holders. We look through their mortgage statements even if they're a standard business. We have clients who have SBA loans or have different loans and all different types of stuff. The debt to equity ratio is not what they think it is, and their position to recourse, or their position to the bank coming after them when things don't go as planned is not as strong as they think. So we always take that into consideration when planning for our clients. We make sure that there are vehicles in place if debt has to be renegotiated with the bank. I have a client we're working on right now. He happens to be a real estate client. He's also in the business of real estate, meaning he has he has a management company as well. We are renegotiating with every single one of his banks that the guarantor on the debt is not him personally. It's going to be his, new LLC and trust that we're forming on his behalf. Now, I do want to point out that we're not attorneys. We don't make legal recommendations. We tend to listen to our clients, find out what their needs on one side and what their goals are inside their business, and help them craft a strategy going forward. At the end, we'll bring in the attorneys and put everything pen to paper and make it kosher and legal. But we are definitely not attorneys. Attorneys do not do this type of work, and the ones who do are going to charge you an arm and a leg to do it. We don't charge. We do charge sometimes, but not always. It depends on the structure. How does a business owner get his equity in and out of the business? Now, this is a big question that our clients are always worrying about, meaning you built up this big business for yourself or a small business for yourself. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into it over 20, 30 years. And now how are you going to get all that out? You invested, all this time, money, effort. Maybe it supported your family throughout the time frame, but you want to now turn around, sell it. You want to turn around, get your investment back. How is that doable? A lot of times you'll view this as a trap, meaning a business owner, you're going to have all this responsibility that we just kind of went through. Like you're going to sign leases, long-term leases for a business, but you don't necessarily know if the business is going to survive. You're going to be signing debt towards your business, again, not really knowing what the business is going to do over the next 20, 30 years. And now it comes time to get out of this stuff, and you're kind of stuck because people are not giving you the money you think your business is worth, because in your mind, it may be worth $1 million. Onto the open market, maybe it's worth $300,000. So, it can be a trap sometimes that on paper may look good, but in actuality can be problematic. So again, planning is very, very important. Okay, so there's three types of business owners. There's your sole owner, one person, one-man show. His ability to sell that business is going to be an outside sale to somebody else, maybe in a similar business, a competitor or someone who does something like him that can add, like him or her, where they can add this line of business to their business and make it grow. You can sell it to your management. Now, this requires a ton of foresight if you're going to be selling internally your business to your employees or to your top employees. You can maintain ownership and do piecemeal sales, kind of a wait and see approach, which we'll talk about later. You could have some form of, a slowly paid out sale where you have kind of like a slowly depreciating retention in your business that gets slowly dwindled over time, and you get certain benefits of kind of keeping that ownership. A wait and see approach is something we very commonly see done. It's something we will definitely recommend a lot in businesses where people want their family to come in. Maybe someone hasn't earned their sweat and tears yet, and you want to kind of bring them into the business. Let's say you are, we're dealing with a contracting company where this is going on right now. This guy's a cement contractor out on the island. He wants to bring his children into the business, but his kids haven't proven it himself yet, and his kids don't have the ability to buy him out yet. Maybe he had his kid working for him for 5 or 10 years beforehand, and they grew the business together, but not really, the father or mom maybe is not fully trusting yet that the son's going to take the business and continue to grow it. So we'll kind of slowly over time put assets or percentages of the ownership into a trust for the children. with the ability to pull it back out right away if things don't go as planned. We've even seen clients that have given their business over to their children over time, and even dictated in the agreement what type of health insurance they wanted going forward for mom and dad. So this is a very common approach to transferring ownership inside families or inside operating companies to people who currently work there, where you do it slowly over time and kind of give people the benefit of, say, hey, if we sell it to somebody else in the next 5 years and now you're technically a 25% owner inside this trust, you're going to get this benefit. But we're going to kind of give you slowly over time. This way you can kind of get your equity out slowly as the owner, and you can stay on and still receive payments from your children or management team or whoever you're selling it to. So this can be a very common approach that is used a lot. It kind of leaves the decision making done slowly over time, and it can be something that's easier to swallow than making big decisions earlier on. When you have multiple owners, you have managing partners, you have investors, you have multiple managing partners. This is a big issue that kind of comes up. What happens if one of the managing partners wants to get out? What happens if someone wants to get access to the equity prior to the other people? So we'll come back to that as we go through the presentation or as we go through this talk. This is one of the areas that we see a lot of. I have a client right now we're working on where we have 2 managing partners and then we have 3 investors. And the agreement between the managing partners and the investors is slightly different. The benefits that are built in for the managing partners and how they protect their percentages of the business is different than the investors. The buy-sell provisions of the company, again, are different for the managing partners as they are for the investors, because everyone's got different needs, different wants, and different responsibilities to a business. And then you have a family business where you have kids in the business, or you want to keep it inside the business. So that's going to be an intra-family sale where, again, we may go back to the wait and see approach, but using family members as opposed to management. So far so good? Everybody with me? Any questions yet before we kind of go through, valuation methods that we use when we discuss setting up proper agreements between partners and business owners? I kind of want to get a feel for if anyone's receiving anything I'm saying. So if people could kind of let me know what's going on in the chat, this would be helpful. I'm not hearing any of you guys, so I feel like I'm talking to myself. You can unmute everybody. Okay, I'm going to try to keep it going, but again, I would love for people to kind of chime in and see what people are thinking. If they have any questions yet about your particular situation, how any of this may apply to you, would be really helpful. So I don't feel like I'm talking to a screen by myself. One of the things that I find very interesting about this whole new Zoom world that we're using, for us, we do everything in person. All our conversations are done in person, so we can kind of gauge our clients' reactions, see what they're thinking. One of the things that we always tell our clients is that feelings are not negotiable. You can tell us everything you feel during a meeting, and it's not something that your clients or partners can argue with because it's a feeling, it's not a fact. So, and with Zoom, it's kind of difficult to do that because I have no idea. It's very hard to read somebody. Okay, so how is a business valued? What's the actual value of your particular business? So there are things we look at. We look at tax filings. Okay, we're going to look at book value, and we're going to walk through what book value is. There are people that use formal appraisals at time of sale. So these are some issues that kind of come up when it comes to appraising a business or what a business is valued. So tax filings, it could say one thing, and you could think, again, your business is worth a ton of money because of its tax filings, but at the end of the day, what's someone going to actually pay for it? For example, let's just use myself as an example. We have recurring revenue. Our business does fairly well for itself, but I don't think it's worth a ton of money to an outside buyer because at the end of the day, the recurring revenue is going to come in, if we just maintain relationships. But, to kind of build on that, it's a little, there's no reason you need our clients to build on. You could technically go out and do it yourself. So maybe our tax filings are high and the revenue we make is high, but for an outside member or someone's in the same industry, it's not going to be worth a ton of money. Even though maybe let's say it makes $1 million a year, it's not going to be worth what a typical business is worth that makes $1 million a year. I have again, take someone who's an Amazon seller, which is fairly common in the from world. What's your business actually worth? Your goods you have in the warehouse. That's about it. Maybe even do. I have an Amazon client that does, I don't know, $30 million a year in sales. His business is worth maybe 25% of that, and it's really only worth something to 3 or 4 people, and it's people who do exactly what he does and could kind of take his revenue streams and put it into their place. It's not worth it to me. Even if I was in that same business that sold, goods and services on the internet, it's not worth it to me. This guy has this particular setup that works well. He kind of figured out how to, game the system a little bit that works to his advantage. Not everybody else could do that. So again, just because your tax filings say that you're making money doesn't mean your business is worth a ton of money. Divorce is something we always plan for, especially when it comes to appraisals of businesses and what they're actually worth. If you're going to get divorced, if you're going to be going through a personal bankruptcy, if your spouse is going to be going through a bankruptcy, this can be problematic to your business because they're going to pull your shares of the business into them to court, which is going to extremely devalue your percentage of your ownership. It will also dilute your decision-making power if you have somebody else. So again, these are things to kind of look at when we build in valuation formulas in our documents, when we talk to clients about putting together buy-sell agreements or operating agreements that make sense. These are things we're going to be discussing with them. What do they want to happen if, God forbid, one of them gets divorced or one of them goes into bankruptcy? And the question would be like, well, what do you mean? What do I care if my partner gets divorced? Well, if your partner gets divorced and their spouse is vindictive and they're pulling the asset of this particular business, that share of the asset, into court and saying, hey, I want my fair share and I want a seat at the table, that could be a big problem because they haven't had a seat at the table till now. So we'll build in triggers that things like that occur, that it's not doable, that the court can't do that. Again, not everything is, so black and white, but there's a lot of gray area when it comes to this type of stuff. Appraisals, you'll see a lot of agreements that rely on appraisals at time of sale, at the time of a triggering event, whether it's a death, disability, a partner retiring, a partner wanting to get out of the business totally and doing something different, et cetera, et cetera. Appraisals can be very, very expensive to get done. And also an appraisal could be worthless, right? I could appraise my business tomorrow that it's worth $10 million, but in the meantime, someone only wants to buy for $500,000. My business is not worth $10 million just because the appraisal says something. The only time appraisals are really, really worth a lot of value is in hard assets, in real estate, in jewelry, and something that is sellable very easily to multiple people. But businesses, appraisals are very, very difficult to come by that are actually factual, and it's not the best thing to rely on when it comes to these things. So a lot of times when we talk agreements, we'll have multiple things to rely on depending on what the triggering event is, as far as determining what a value of a business is. Okay, so again, the need for planning is extremely important regardless of the type of business you are in. Now, we like formulas when it comes to evaluating what the business is worth. We like formulas. We like different formulas for different strategies. We sometimes rely a lot on book value. Book value is your earnings times a certain multiple, the assets inside the business. And the reason book value is extremely important is because if book value has no value in your business, if you don't put value to it, and you have multiple partners, one of the partners is going to always be devaluing the book value, trying to take money out of the business and assets out of the business. Examples of formulas, I'm not really going to go into that now because I have no idea who everybody on this call is. I don't know what type of business you are in, so to go through examples is going to be not necessarily the best idea. But again, different businesses will use different formulas depending on the type of business, how the business works, how they operate, etc. Certificates of agreed value. This is something also we commonly see in agreements and operating agreements and buy-sell agreements between people. Not necessarily the best idea. That basically what that does is it determines a value at the day of the agreement to your percentages of the business. Let's say the business grows. Let's say the business doesn't grow. It actually drops in value. Let's say, your decision making power has changed over time. So, your value is increased or decreased. So this can get very, very complicated. This triggers a lot of lawsuits. This is typically recommended by attorneys who are either lazy or incompetent or want you back at the table when the lawsuit occurs. Not something we see often done by people who understand that humans things don't stay the same. Things are never static. Factors that are things that kind of come up in this conversation that I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop after this. I'm going to go through the next 3 or 4, then I'm going to stop and you kind of open it up for questions because we're running out of time. Factors that we look at that change the value of your ownership, that change how we view your percentages, are the liquidity that you may have inside the business, locally that the business may have in general, the control that you have over decision-making powers, minority rights. This is a very big thing that we always focus on. If you have partners that are minority partners, say you have a 51% partner and a 49% partner, or any other different setup that you may have, we're going to recommend that the minority partner has some sort of protections. We call it a minority owner bill of rights. One of the things that we're very, very keen on is that minority owners cannot get squeezed out of a business. How can that happen? Let's say the minority owner is not in charge of tax allocations or tax decisions or when they make an allocation of the business. So if you're a business owner, you know that if your business made $1 million this year, the $1 million is going to show up on your tax return, right? Whether you took home the $1 million or not, it's a different story, but it's going to show up on your tax return as income. Yeah, you're going to take expenses against it, etc., but it's going to show up. Let's say, for example, you have multiple partners, and the partner that controls the books and the partner that makes the tax decisions decides, you know what, partner C, we really don't want him in the business anymore. We want to kind of push him out. Us, partner A and B, we have the money. We can ride this while we push him out. So what we're going to do is we're not going to distribute any money this year, even though tax-wise the distribution happens, but we're not actually going to distribute money. We're going to leave it in the corporate account. If that happens, you're going to have to pay taxes, and the minority partner is going to have to pay taxes, but he's not going to have the money to do it, which is going to effectively push him out of the business. It's going to squeeze him to a point where he's going to get to the table and start making decisions, and maybe making decisions that are not to his best benefit. So we will always look to protect that, make sure that doesn't happen. Other things that kind of come up with minority partners as well, certain decision-making powers that they don't have, that could put them in a position of getting squeezed. These are things we're going to look at when we're dealing with partners. Okay, so again, the opportunity, the things that we look at, how to kind of plan for different issues that kind of come up. We want to have plans for the broadest range of possibilities so that when it does happen, there's a plan in place. We had a client, for example, that had an aneurysm in Vegas at a show. What gives us the happiest response, again, it's a terrible story, and ran a very big business, but the guy couldn't stare at a computer when he came back from, he somehow managed to get the ambulance to the room and saved himself, but he couldn't stare at a computer when he was done. His wife called our office and goes, I don't know what to do. And our response was, don't worry, it's taken care of. That to us is really what we look at when we talk to planning for our clients. We want to make sure that there are things in place for when things don't go as planned. There's a process that the business is going to follow that continues the growth of the business. By the way, a business with a plan is extremely more valuable on the open market than a business without a plan. A business that has focused on continuity, a business that has discussed what happens in different situations that arise in the business world, if they've planned for it and there are documents in place that talk about buy-sell, that talk about disability risk, that talk about death risk, that talk about other risks, divorce, disputes, early retirement, people who want to sell at different times, all this type of stuff. A new owner could walk in, replace you very fairly easily, and say, okay, let's keep this going. It makes it a lot more valuable on the street. This is our process that we put our clients through, and I'm kind of, maybe go through. We know after we have a fact-finding conversation with our clients where we figure out who you are as a person, who you are as a business owner, where your business can potentially go, what are the things that you're concerned about in your business, what feelings you have towards your business, do you care about it, outlasting you, et cetera, et cetera. once we agree to a scope of work of what we're going to do, we're going to fact find, we're going to get all the data, we're going to collect a copy of all your insurances, we're going to collect a copy of all your tax returns. We collect copies of people's mortgage statements, etc. We collect everything. We'll determine if there's going to be a fee. We'll discuss everything. And then once we have all the facts down straight, we'll come back to you with suggestions on what to do. And we'll build a term sheet, which can then be, once everything's agreed upon, can be taken to an attorney and fairly easily drafted. We generally recommend certain insurances in place when there's partners or not. Again, it will depend on what the business is. If there's no need for insurance in the business, we may charge for the planning. If there's a need for insurance, that's how we'll make our money on the commission from the insurance sale. Okay, so then, these are different things that kind of come up. We have retirement, early retirement, people wanting to leave a business, death, disability, permanent disability, temporary disabilities, etc. And the list goes on. We could I could take this conversation for another 2 or 3 hours and things we kind of pay attention to for our clients. But in the meantime, and mistakes that we see a lot of times in planning, and I don't know. I assume this is a mostly religious group of people, myself included. We see a lot of we get a lot of times, business owners, just basing on the names of everybody. We get a lot of times business owners who want to keep the business in the family, and maybe you have a kid or two who's coming into the business and a kid or two who's not coming into the business, who's doing something else. Maybe you've supported a kid or two going through college or some higher education, and some kids not, and some kids are coming to the business. How do you true up values when you do that so there's no fights later on? How do you make sure that things go smoothly and are done in a way that is, correct, straight, everybody's fair? Mistakes we see all the time of people ignoring certain risks, buyout provisions that are way too strict that can never really actually happen. We want flexibility in our contracts. We want flexibilities in our planning, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to stop now because I have like 8 minutes left, and I want to kind of leave this open for questions, hear what people are thinking. Guy, if you can open, I don't know if people can actually talk. If we can open this up for talking, that'd be fantastic. But again, everyone's situation is completely different. Everyone's business is completely different. Everyone has different needs, wants, aspirations, goals, desires, and it's our job, it's the job of my team to come in, learn that, make sure that we help you plan for that, and obviously also build into whatever plans we do the ability to kind of be flexible and change as the facts on the ground change. But we see mistakes happen all the time. Everyone in this chat, everyone on this session knows families that's gone through fights, that's gone through issues, business owners that have lost their business because someone passed away or they didn't make these decisions early on. We're here to help anybody who wants. I think we do a good job at what we do. Our clients tend to think we do a good job at what we do. We're at the point in where our clients invite us to their family parties and stuff because they feel like we've really helped them figure out things that they've been thinking about that never really wanted to have a conversation with. And I find this conversation to be extremely helpful to a business owner specifically, more so than anybody else.